I always get the best Christmas gifts. Let's see what we got. Wait. Yo, what is this? This will be a moment in history and completely change your life forever. This will blow your mind. iPhone 14 Pro ship times slip past Christmas, weeks after Apple learned of production issues. As you can see on the official Apple website, you cannot order and get an iPhone 14 or 14 Pro for Christmas. Apple warns that COVID restrictions in China are hurting iPhone production. Violent protests erupt at Apple's main iPhone plant in China. Protesting workers are beaten at Chinese iPhone factory. Even Elon Musk attacks Apple, saying App Store fees are obviously too high due to iOS and Android duopoly. Musk tweeted it's a hidden 30% tax on the internet. In a following up post, he tagged the Department of Justice Antitrust Division, which is reportedly investigating App Store rule. iPhone App Store executive Phil Schiller deleted his Twitter account. And this is even crazier. The official Apple Twitter deletes all of their tweets. Can somebody please tell me right now what is going on? Apple is acting extremely weird in a very vulnerable time for the economy. And if you don't understand what Apple means for the entire world, it's valued at over $2 trillion in 2021, considered the most valuable technology company in the entire world, in all of the lands, okay? In 2020, the company recorded over 1 billion active iPhones. Apple generated $360 billion in revenue in 2021, and 52% of that revenue came from iPhone sales. It's so big that it holds the largest weight of the S&P 500 index. If you didn't know what the S&P 500 index stands for, it's basically a basket of the top 500 companies in the stock market. And then there's one number that is allocated to represent the top 500 companies. And it's crazy because Apple represents the biggest weight in the S&P 500. Not only is it the biggest weight, but it shows almost identical correlation to the tops and bottoms of the S&P 500. When Apple bottoms, so does the S&P 500. When Apple comes to a top, so does the S&P 500. Apple dictates what the biggest measure of our equities markets or the stock market goes. Where Apple goes, the entire stock market goes. If something happens to Apple, it could take us in the next leg down of this massive recession and bear market. In February of this year, Facebook dropped 30% in 7 days. It's the largest fall ever recorded in Facebook history, and it came right after missing their Q4 earnings. If Apple misses their earnings in Q4, it can be devastating for the entire market, including stocks, Bitcoin, altcoins. Everything will fall immediately. And it just so happens to be that you cannot get an iPhone under your Christmas tree on the most lucrative day for Apple. This is insane, and it's blowing my mind as I speak it from my lips. But let's start at the root problem, because the root problem is also devastating for the world. There's a massive semiconductor issue on planet Earth, and the biggest countries, Taiwan and China, are dealing with mass protests. People do not want to work under horrible labor conditions that Apple has created for them. Not only that, but massive droughts, economies being moved because of the semiconductor industry. And this is the biggest reason why Apple cannot make shipments on the most important day of the entire year. But let me explain the economics and exactly what goes on in the semiconductor industry. let's start off with the general definition. What are semiconductors? Semiconductors are an essential component of every single electronic device on planet Earth, enabling advances in communication, computing, healthcare, military systems, transportation, clean energy, and countless other applications. But there's one thing I want to highlight: military. They're in missiles, okay? Technically, a semiconductor is a material such as silicon, which conducts electricity to a greater extent than an insulator such as glass, but is also less of a conductor than copper. Silicon is an abundant element found in rocks and sand that's purified, melted down, and then sliced into surfaces on which chips are built into a grid formation. Each wafer can have dozens of thin layers, making up billions of transistors that determine what each chip can do. The process itself is very water intensive, requiring millions of gallons of water. The semiconductor industry is becoming a leader across the world because we are making more and more smartphones, electronic devices, smart cars. Everything nowadays requires a computer chip. You'd think this industry would grow forever, but global semiconductor revenues are extremely volatile. Why? Well, let me explain. Chips are everything, and since the pandemic, there's been a massive shortage. Everyone started buying computers, iPhones, and video game systems, and they started working from home, and the industry was not ready for that big demand. To make it worse, it turns out that one single company makes up for 24% of all of the world's chips, and more importantly, pay attention, 90% of the advanced chips that are used for iPhones are made by one company. The most advanced chips are the small, fast, and used in iPhone type of chips, supercomputers, and automotive AI products, which are obviously the most important nowadays. Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company, better known as TSMC, is quietly making chips for basically every phone on Earth. And since the pandemic has now cooled down in most parts of the world, PC sales dropped a whopping 15% in the third quarter, according to estimates by the International Data Corporation. The research firm also predicted that smartphone sales would drop 6.5% this year. But the world's massive reliance on TSMC also leaves the global chip supply vulnerable to earthquakes, droughts, geopolitical tensions with China, and much more. TSMC has basically become a monopoly, and all of the manufacturing operations, for the most part, are out of Taiwan and China. Believe it or not, but the United States was actually the birthplace of advanced silicon, but Asia basically took that over. Now Asia accounts for 75% of the world's chip manufacturing. But out of pure fear, TSMC is basically trying to move back to the United States with a $12 billion fabrication plant in the middle of Arizona. Unfortunately, that's going to take a while. Today, only 12% of the world's semiconductors are made out of the United States, and that's down from 37% in the 1990s. Considering that TSMC is producing over 20% of the world's current semiconductor supply and over 90% of the advanced ones, we are trying really hard to bring manufacturing back to the United States. TSMC has 12 fabrication plants, almost all of them in Taiwan and China. They account for nearly 54% of all global revenue. The point is that there's a heavy reliance on TSMC in Taiwan, leaving the world vulnerable to potential slowdowns. So the Biden administration proposed a $52 billion in subsidies for chip companies like TSMC to manufacture specifically on US soil. It has been nicknamed the CHIPS Act. And the subsidies like the CHIPS Act are absolutely critical for the success of our country, not only to compete, but also recruit these firms to operate in the United States. Otherwise, we'll basically be importing chips for the rest of our life and the rest of the United States' life. Over the last 20 to 40 years, we have seen a massive decrease in cost of manufacturing in other countries. It's between 20 to 25% cheaper for American firms to produce their semiconductors outside of the United States. Industry reports estimate that $50 billion from the United States government would enable the construction of 19 new fabs in the US over the next 10 years, more than doubling domestic chip manufacturing. And this is good, but it's going to take till 2024, so we have a 2-year period where there's going to be issues. And this monopoly actually gets worse. There's a big monopoly in the semiconductor industry of the people that create the machines to create the chips. If you thought that TSMC's 90% dominance over the advanced chip production is bad, ASML is a company with 100% market share of the machines used to reproduce microchips. These EUV lithography machines cost up to $200 million each, and they're only made by a single company, which is called the Advanced Semiconductor Materials Lithography, or ASML. Today, ASML has a monopoly of the fabrication of EUV machines, the most advanced lithography equipment that's needed to make every single advanced processor. It's getting out of control. ASML's stock has skyrocketed since 2018, while they basically have 3 customers: TSMC, Intel, and Samsung, and they all fight to be on the front line for ASML's next breakthrough technology named High-NA. The price tag for this next machine, which promises to push the boundaries of known physics, is more than $300 million. It's so expensive that most companies cannot afford it. Only 5 customers can afford to buy EUV systems: Micron, SK Hynix, Samsung, Intel, and TSMC. The last 3 make up for nearly 84% of ASML's business. TSMC takes up the majority of the business and accounts with just over 40%. ASML projects a 20% sales growth this year and an annual revenue growth rate of 11% until the end of the decade. That's pretty aggressive numbers in my opinion. With such a reliance on one customer for sales, this is kind of weird. Unless Samsung and Intel catch up, which could take some time, maybe 2024, if something were to happen to TSMC where they aren't producing enough chips for any number of reasons, it could be a disaster for ASML. And as I mentioned before, there's a lot of reasons why that could happen. In a recent interview with Bloomberg, Ken Griffin, CEO of Citadel, says that the US would enter an immediate depression if China invades Taiwan and cuts off access to the semiconductor industry. These concerns have grown in recent months that China could be eyeing an invasion of Taiwan after the president secured another term. The US National Security Council projects that a Chinese attack and the loss of TSMC could disrupt the world economy to a tune of more than $1 trillion. That would be catastrophic. Let's look at the most well-known portfolios in the world, including Berkshire Hathaway. They have been aggressively adding Apple positions, which now makes up 40% of their entire portfolio. And they recently made another $5.1 billion investment into TSMC. The new position gives Berkshire more exposure to its largest investment, Apple, as the iPhone maker makes up a big chunk of Taiwan semiconductor revenue, more than 25% to be exact, according to estimates from Bloomberg. But that concentrated bet could be a bigger loser if Griffin's bleak view on China and Taiwan plays out. The TSMC's market dominance has risen in the ranks of one of the most profitable companies in the world, overtaking Tencent last year as the most valuable company by market capitalization in Asia. TSMC is such a giant that, together with the rest of the semiconductor industry, constitutes for about 15% of Taiwan's gross domestic product, GDP. The company also makes up about 1/3 of the entire value of all Taiwanese stocks, the entire stock market in Taiwan. Now let's pretend that there weren't any political issues in China. Other concerns make this massive investment a bit questionable. Let's take a look at recent drought and water issues that have been affecting Taiwan. As I mentioned earlier, producing chips is very water intensive. As the demand for microchips spiked from 2015 to 2019, TSMC's water consumption rose by 70% to more than 156,000 tons of water per day across 3 industrial parks in Taiwan. That's enough water to fill 60 Olympic-sized swimming pools every single day. The water consumption problem became very evident last year during a drought that hit southern Taiwan particularly hard. Several of TSMC's fabrication plants are in the southern city of Tainan. And to keep them running, water had to be trucked from other parts of the country. The semiconductor industry water demands, combined with the effects of climate change, are pushing southern Taiwan towards a water deficiency of about 390,000 metric tons daily, according to Taiwan's Water Resource Agency. This deficiency could have major economic and security implications on the population, and it's pretty crazy that they even do this. I mean, I want you to look at your current iPhone right now. It's like, is it worth all of this devastation? I don't know. You tell me in the comment section below. But the state of Taiwan's agricultural sector, as well as the food policy, has resulted in the country importing more than 70% of all its food products from abroad, which is the highest level of food imports of any country in the region. But how does this all fit together? Let's think about it. We have Apple, one of the largest corporations in the S&P 500. They are heavily dependent on TSMC for producing all their chips. ASML is highly dependent on TSMC, which is one of its highest revenue streams. So if something were to happen to TSMC, whether that be geopolitical issues with China or severe drought issues that they're already facing, it's going to affect many other companies, the biggest of which could be Apple and ASML. This in turn would heavily affect Berkshire Hathaway, since they have over 40% of their portfolio invested in Apple and also have exposure to TSMC. All of these different companies being affected at the same time could massively change the US economy. And it's causing even bigger issues that just started yesterday. This is breaking news. Now, this is where it clearly gets out of control. The economics behind semiconductors make it very hard for Apple to keep up with production. And combine that with the fact that you have to update your iPhone literally every single year, it actually causes massive devastation for the world, and people are tired of it, to the point where Apple is forcing horrible working conditions and people are protesting. So economies are being affected because of this overconsumption issue of having to have the latest and greatest iPhone every single year. iPhone manufacturing is causing problems with the climate itself, and it's also causing issues with governments like China and Taiwan, as well as the people, and they're protesting. They're protesting and fighting against Apple. It's becoming a massive problem. This overconsumption issue in America is destroying people. Literally yesterday, people were protesting on the streets and getting beat for it by the Chinese police. It gets worse. People are using their cars to block the road so that the CCP's big whites, or the people in the big white coats, the quarantine people, can't take them away for quarantine. If you watch the World Cup in China, they blur out the people in the stands so that Chinese people don't see that in other parts of the world, they're not wearing masks for quarantine. China is reporting 32,943 new COVID cases on November 24th versus 31,656 a day earlier. Highest since the pandemic began. In the city of Guangzhou and the capital of Guangdong province, which has the largest number of cases, the construction of a quarantine center for 80,000 people has begun. China is gonna shut down again, and there's gonna be massive problems with every production facility that is connected to anything technology. Guys, it's gonna be crazy. A lot of this seems devastating, but I wanna show you how you could actually make money off of this. Now let me start to put everything together so it starts to make sense. It's very simple. We have semiconductor issues all over the world. there's a hot point in Taiwan specifically because of this semiconductor issue that pretty much runs every variable of our lives and all of our technological devices. Everything runs off semiconductors, and the strategic stronghold is in Taiwan. You see China and the United States fighting over it, going back and forth, trying to assert dominance, basically who owns unofficially Taiwan, because obviously Taiwan is independent, but everybody's laying claim to protecting them or owning them, right? China wants to own them. The United States is trying to protect them for obvious reasons. We have a big reliance in Taiwan over these manufacturing issues. And what's happening is they're trying to migrate it over to the United States. But the problem is that this is not going to happen until like 2024. In 2024, in Arizona and Ohio, we're going to officially have these manufacturers, these chip manufacturers. But right now, till then, there's going to be a massive problem, okay? We're seeing it already with Apple, and this is where it gets crazy. As you can see, the S&P 500, which is at the top left-hand corner, on the exact day we're looking at. Now, I want to break this down for you. The S&P 500 is top left, Apple is the right. We see the Taiwan new dollar, which is the government-backed currency in Taiwan, and then we have Bitcoin here in the bottom right-hand corner. So the top left-hand corner, if we look at the exact top date, it was the exact top date at Apple on the top right-hand corner. Again, look at it. This is January 4th, 2020. It's the exact top of Apple. Now, if we look at the bottom of Apple right here, it was basically the exact local bottom of the S&P 500. Let's look at another bottom of Apple. You can see, not exactly, but you can see it's very close right here to the bottom of the S&P 500 on the top left-hand corner. Let's look at another top of Apple right here. This top of Apple is very, very close, the exact day of the S&P 500. It just seems like Apple and the S&P 500 are highly correlated, and the S&P 500 is a basket of the top 500 companies in the United States. So it seems like Apple is like the leading indicator. It just seems like Apple moves the entire tech industry. Now it gets even crazier. If we look at the top of the Taiwan new dollar, it's basically coming right after the S&P 500 top, which is the same top of Apple. So it seems like there's like the top of Apple bringing down the S&P 500, and then that brings down the country's currency, which is obviously a massive problem because Taiwan's losing purchasing power of their dollar, which then again brings down Bitcoin, right? So you can see Bitcoin right here in the right-hand side is literally topping out before the S&P 500. Bitcoin falls before the S&P 500. So if we think that, for example, Q4 earnings for the Apple in January is going to have a devastation of the market, then from history, as you could tell here, Bitcoin topped out before the S&P 500. Now, if you know anything about what I've been talking about for a long time in this channel, it's very clear that all altcoins follow Bitcoin. So if Bitcoin falls 10%, altcoins fall 30-40%. So if you have exposure to an altcoin right now and you are not watching what I'm saying, I'm hitting it from pretty much every perspective. I haven't even talked about the macroeconomic environment. Right now, I'm purely talking about risk on assets, and I've made other videos about the macroeconomic environment that's exacerbating all of the issues that I'm currently talking about right now. If Apple and other companies, by the way, it's not just Apple, but Apple's the biggest one. If these companies miss their Q4 earnings, it's going to be devastating for every risk on asset market, including cryptocurrency and everything. Now, if you've been following me on my channel, I've been showing you guys how to short the market. This doesn't have to be a scary thing for everyone. If you're disciplined and understand where the market direction is, you actually can place a bet. You can bet on that like I'm currently doing right now. I'm betting on the downside of the market and making money as we speak. It doesn't have to be this horrible event that's super depressing. You can make money off of knowing the direction of the market. So I urge everybody watching this video, please take advantage of the education I provided you. Go look for more evidence and back it up with your own research, right? And then learn how to short the market, bet on the downside of the market, and make money like I've been doing for the past 7 months. I'm trying to show you guys the truth of how to become financially independent. So if you appreciate that, do me a favor, like this video, subscribe to the channel. And of course, if you don't get with it, you will get left behind. Thanks for watching this, guys. Catch you in the next video. This video is brought to you by the only thing I ever talk about, which is Fundamental Secrets, my product where we show you guys our trades, exactly how to make money in any market condition. We've been talking about this for 7 months and we've been shorting the market, making money on the downside of the market while people have been holding bags. The great part about this is that it's currently 40% off for Black Friday. So go to the pinned comment below, click it, apply on our website, and one of our consultants will reach out to you and explain exactly what it is.